Well, as we begin this session on Surfing Your Soul during the MLK Beloved Community celebration, wanted to begin with a small quote from Maria Montessori that speaks of the way that the child continues to live in each of us and the importance of looking at our children with that awareness that there's a child ongoing for each one of us. Montessori wrote this in The Secret of Childhood. The social question of childhood penetrates deeply into our inner lives, rousing our consciences and stirring us to act. A child is not a stranger, one simply to be observed from outside. Rather, childhood constitutes the most important element in a person's life, for it is in one's early years that a person is made.
Thank you, Annie. Welcome as we all just breathe that in together. Welcome to the Martin Luther King Convergence. We are here with Surfin' Your Soul interview with Annie Spade. The Compassion Games has been supporting this Martin Luther King Being Beloved Community Convergence for several years now. And we're here in the Zoom rooms, we're here online, and there's many, many people in communities on the feet offering projects, all in honor of bringing forth Dr. Martin Luther King's dream of this beloved community. So today we're having a conversation about how developing the whole child does build beloved community. And we're going to have two perspectives in these next 2 hours. We have Annie Spade here, who's going to give us a perspective on Montessori. And then we have Nicolette coming in after the hour, and we'll be looking at the Waldorf perspective. So my name is Karen Trujillo. I am the founder of Surfin' Your Soul Family Services, and I am passionate about connecting families in the space of the heart and fostering children's what I call soul development, their light, their essence, the truth of who they are. So I have spent many, many years, 30 plus years in early childhood education. I'm a family coach. I travel around the world and do just that. Work with families in their homes, in communities. I also am a mother of 4 boys who range from ages 26 to 34. So a lot of time spent with young children. I ran a home daycare for 6 years, and I've always felt that my best teachers are the children. So Annie Spade, and I just want to look at my notes for a moment here, but Annie and I connected really through the space of a heart on these online convergences. I think that she was involved in Peace Week, a Peace Week journey, it was actually an excursion of peace. And we met in these Zoom rooms, and we knew immediately that we had a connection, this love and passion for developing the whole child. Annie is the founder of a Montessori school in Texas. She is a director there. So she still every day is with the children from that director perspective, but also teaching children aged 2 to 6. And she has I want you to talk a little bit about the Montessori Project, which is a program that she launched, and maybe it got a little busier during the times where a lot of people were staying at home these last 2 years, how we can bring the Montessori philosophy into the homes. And then she has an exciting, I'd say, project coming up with television that I can't wait to hear more about. Yet really where I respect Annie is the deep connection that you have to your heart so that you can see clearly and live your passion, your soul purpose. And I think that ignites that in not just the children, but in their parents and all of those around you. And that is one way that I really am inspired by you. And I respect how you build beloved community in those ways. So Annie, please feel free to share any other details about yourself, but let me pass it over to you.
Wow, thank you so much, Karen. What a beautiful introduction. So personal, and absolutely, it's just been a marvelous journey in these Zoom rooms over these years that really the pandemic gave us the opportunity to meet more and more and to experience those resonances and those collaborative opportunities. So I'm really thrilled to be here and so grateful to you for opening this Zoom room, this convergence room here to honor Martin Luther King's dream, to think that he would have been 94 today. And yeah, and I just know that so many of us really take his vision, his dream, as a guiding light for our lives. And I certainly have, and I know that you have too. So yeah, I was trained in Montessori over 40 years ago. Began actually with a kind of the focus on the spiritual child from the Montessori perspective, honestly, was my very first training 40 years ago. And I've just gone from there and gotten the full training. And so I really tried to integrate the whole thing. And just like you, Karen, I mean, I'm the oldest of 8 children. So I recognized at some point that I have lived with young children my entire life. There's never been a time in my life that I have not been with children under the age of 6. And, our passion comes from what we experienced as children. I wanted to share that quote at the beginning because it's so dear to my heart. And it's absolutely true for me that because of things that I saw, that I experienced, maybe longings that I missed in my own childhood, that spurred me on to look for something different to do with children. And I stumbled upon Montessori in my sophomore year of college, studying psychology, but not within the university, at a bookstore actually. And it's just gone from there. And so what I've really become so interested in is Maria Montessori did not like really for the adults to be called teachers. She said the teacher is the inner teacher. So that what we see in an infant, honestly, it shows up in infancy. I mean, I have 3 grown daughters that are in their late 30s and early 40s. And I mean, the first 2 are a year apart, and the differences in those children were just astounding, in their preferences and all of that from the time they were born, literally from the time they were born. So we see how there's that drive in each person to become who you came here to be that point of light. And so the first thing is to help our children to be in touch with that inner voice. And so there are many different things that I have developed over the years that I do with the children to help them access that, because I do feel that our culture has made it much more difficult. I spent hours outside as a child, wandering around and in silence, but maybe it's not quite that way for our children today. And so they really appreciate and need our help to support that. Karen, you're muted.
Thank you. Let's pause there for just a moment. I want to, let's see here. You said so many things, right, that are just right on the mark. So part of this convergence this weekend and really bringing attention to being beloved community is because we're seeing so many places in our world where we haven't realized that dream of beloved community. I mean, we, look at this war in Ukraine, the children are, look what's happening to those children there. Even with so many efforts of people taking care of the children and so much good happening, this just doesn't need to happen anymore. And so the themes I've been hearing as we've been talking these last few days is that there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect in the heart. And that's where I invite everyone that's here in the Zoom rooms, that's listening at whatever point you're listening to this, is, a couple questions that I came into this is, what is my part to do? As the village member of building beloved community, what's mine to do? And I know for me, one of mine is that heart connection. That's what the heart thread work is. And Surfin Your Soul, the reason that my business, the family services, is called Surfin Your Soul is because I actually grew up with a lot of safety and unconditional love and a lot of outdoor time, as you described. And yet I was still misunderstood with my natural soul gifts. And my parents just didn't quite know what to do with that. And then I was in a Catholic school, and my ideas and thoughts and brilliance wasn't honored in what the teachers were trained that they were supposed to do for the children. So many things can happen in these next 50 minutes. We can get ignited about what are we here to do. We can rebalance some woundedness within ourselves just through the process of this open-hearted communication that we're having here, which I always love, because it's the woundedness in ourselves that's causing this pain of the world. Hurt people hurt people. So we still are having this abundance of abuse and those very uncomfortable, like the guns, children bringing guns to school at a younger and younger age and using them. And so these are the areas that we're looking to rectify to get to the root cause. And you said something, Annie, that I believe, is that root cause is children in many schools, there isn't an opportunity for their light and their natural essence to be developed. And so before we got on, I just laid down on the ground and two words came to me, the heart. So how do we nurture that heart connection in our early childhood development centers, schools, homes, anytime we're working with young children, and nature. Mm-hmm. We have been, and you just emphasized that, children in classrooms, there's not enough classrooms that are, giving children access to nature, which is where they will naturally develop. And that's what I'm looking forward to hearing more from you on the Montessori, is giving children, in the poem you read, giving them the space, the silence, and the time. So I pass it back to you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I could tell you had something to say, and I really want this to be conversational.
Yes.
So absolutely, that's my next topic.
Next topic, and then we will open it up if there's questions. So yes, go ahead.
The next thing I wanted to say is that, the child, I've come to recognize the eco-psychologists are noting that that's what they're finding in a lot of adults when they're counseling, is that there's been a disconnect from the natural world that we're just hungering for with every aspect of our being. It's actually meant to be, I picked this up from reading them, it's meant to, the natural world is meant to be our second womb, if you think about it. When we come forth from our mother's bodies, the environment that we're invited to be comfortable in and to know is the natural world. And when you think about the way children are raised, especially in the first world, we insulate our babies. They don't see the fluttering leaves and the flocks of birds overhead and the clouds, and feel a little rain or the texture of the grass and all of that, and that's all about relationship, because we know what's at the root of addiction is disconnect and isolation. And our first opportunity, honestly, of course, we have our family, the connection to mother and family is there from the beginning. But the infant is seeking to know this place where they've been born. And it's not a human constructed kind of space that we tend to insulate our infants and our toddlers in. The other thing that I have to mention is the sense of agency. And this is so key in Montessori, because when the child has the opportunity to breathe a bit into that inner space, to know that inner voice a bit, and to have some connection to humans and family and the natural world, the other piece of that, and it all works together, is whatever is driving that child, that they are able to act on that. So that innate sense of agency. I mean, the Montessorians say the child's first act of independence is when they turn from the breast to see something in the room that interests them, that they heard. I mean, and it's true. And we have to, as we honor that, then you can see how that sets up a positive cycle for the child. Like you mentioned, Karen, about the ways that you were shut down, in ways that you would have wanted to express or create or experience or study or whatever it is. And that is absolutely what drove me into Montessori, was I could see how that had not happened in my life either. I certainly had ways that I got around that, being in Girl Scouts and earning badges that I wanted and all of that kind of, reading things that I was interested in on the side. But that wasn't the main part of what I was being served or offered by the adults in my life. So I'll just end by saying this, that, the future belongs to adaptability. And the more that our children can and even ourselves can feel that we can know ourselves and be connected and know how to be active, to use our agency in a positive way, that's going to bring us far. And there's a little quote that I want to share about resilience. It's just one sentence that was given to me by Jim Piccarello. I have to give him credit. He makes short films, and some for children, and is quite successful. And I had a conversation with him just a short while back, and he said this: in a changing world, what can we offer to build children's resilience? And all of these three aspects, the knowing of self, the connection to the natural world, which, by the way, whatever happens with our human relationships, those established relationships, I saw the heart of Scorpio this morning, and Antares rose again in our skies. And it just brings me joy. And that's going to happen. That cycle is absolutely dependable. The natural world has so many things like that we can relate to, that establishes a core of a sense of connection for the child, and then that sense of being able to act in the world. I believe those three elements absolutely help the children and us to have the resilience and adaptability that we need to persist and to grow.
Oof, you said so many things there. So I want to say the future belongs to adaptability. That is powerful. And could you reread the quote again?
Yes. In a changing world, what can we offer to build children's resilience?
Yeah, I can see us doing some interviews with children, and where they got their resilience from, because we can think of so many children that we know that have, that power of resilience. I want to take a moment to see, perhaps Carol, you have a comment or question or something you want to interject here? And you can just unmute.
Thank you. Thank you both so much for this wonderful conversation. I'm not familiar with the word agency, so I wondered if you could explain what that meant, and then I'd like to share a couple of things.
Well, that's key to Montessori, Carol. So as you look into Montessori, when you go into the Montessori room, a well-developed one. Of course, there are all different Montessori trainings. So my training is with AMI, which is the international association that Maria Montessori herself started in 1929 to protect the integrity of her work. There have been many interpretations. So, but just know that there are some different interpretations. But when you go into my children's house, which Maria Montessori also preferred to call it children's house, which again speaks to this is a place for children to gather. You see everything on shelves as individual activities, if you will. So a pasting activity, a sewing activity, a math work, a writing activity. These are there for the children to choose as individuals. So this is where you see, and we have a 2.5 to 3 hour work session where the children just literally come into this room and what would you like to do today? And so the 17 children in my current group will go in 17 different directions. And one child will spend an hour with their activity. The other child might spend 5 minutes with his. And, and then they know how to put it back and rectify it for the next person. This is part of that whole building beloved community in Montessori. It's absolutely a dynamic community where each person, and so, Margaret Mead said she studied cultures all over the world to find the most peaceful cultures. And she said the most peaceful cultures were ones in which children of mixed ages ran together, is how she put it, And so it allowed for the younger ones to be learning from the older ones to learn how to be nurturing and careful around the younger ones. And we absolutely see that whole dynamic. If a child doesn't resupply something, the next child that goes to get it, oh, oops, there aren't any cloths here, And so that whole, very natural way of being in community is part of what we're doing. It's our praxis. And the adult is not stepping in, taking care of everything. We're there to support that. And in fact, the preferred name is a guide for the adults. And we're in our chairs as much as possible. We adults are in our chairs. And just the dynamic of the children in the room is what creates whatever happens each day. So to say too that if you think of a toddler, a child who's now walking, and so they've got their hands, what they want to participate in life. So when you ask about agency, that's Maria, it was one of the most striking things she found. The child wanted to mop the floor. They wanted to dust the furniture and polish things. And, they saw adults doing these things and they wanted to participate. So that's where that agency, that's where that word comes from, is that sense of where can I contribute? What am I drawn to do here? And so you can see how if that life habit, which we talk about life habits all the time because our life habits are formed by 6. The child absorbs whatever language and culture and way of dress, all of that. So if their culture, if their way of life is living in community, and then when I go home, I'm encouraged to unload the dishwasher, set the table, wipe the chairs off, whatever it is, what a way of being in life that the child comes out of this time of life habits being formed. Great question. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you. So does that mean that in the children's room, as you call it, I think?
Children's house, yes.
Children's house, that they're in different ages in one room?
Ages 2 to 6. That's what I work with. Yeah.
And did you say that what is missing is being out in nature is part of what you'd like to see more of? Or did I misunderstand that?
I mean, we're on 8 acres and they're 8 wild acres. They've not ever been cultivated. And so, we're in a marvelous space. Maria Montessori herself wrote that it's most beneficial for the children to actually do all their activities outside. So she saw that was absolutely primary for young children to be in the natural world. Now, I do a lot of things to connect the children to the native plants and animals. We have a lot of card material. Language acquisition is huge for this age. You have to think about how a child's vocabulary grows at this age. So imagine a child knows the difference between a cat and a dog. But if we see a dog, what kind of dog is it? So I have probably 40 different dog breed cards. Now, these are not wild animals, but I have a bunch of different frogs and turtles and birds and all of these things that the children work with me and learn the names. And so once you have a name for something, then you're looking for particular characteristics. And then the children do little reports on as they get to, because they learn to write in cursive and express their personality that way. So my 4-year-olds are all writing in cursive, and then they write little reports on these animals that they've learned the names of. And so imagine the sense of relationship that they have to the beings in the natural world.
I was wondering, it seems like we all have something in common, that perhaps our gifts weren't brought out or recognized when we were young. And I was recently reading a little poem that a 6-year-old wrote. He was asked to write a poem from the perspective of an object, and he chose a typewriter. And he said, people are always putting paper in me and then hitting the keys and then taking the paper out, but they never recognize my colors. And I've been hitting myself ever since. And I think that was really profound about the trauma that we experience as adults for not being able to find our gift or to share it or to be recognized of having whatever that gift is and to bring it out. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how do you find the particular gifts in the children?
Yeah, I mean, that's why we start at age 2, ideally, and really it should start earlier, if the parent has an idea. But the more, like when a child is being dressed, in the beginning, we have to dress our children. They can't, but as the child gets that myelinization of the nervous system and they can move the arm out, and you feel the child's little arm moving because they recognize this pattern. Oh, mom puts the sleeve on and then pulls my arm through, and they start to do it themselves. That's that's an encouragement again of that agency. And it sounds, it's so early. And yet what I have found over the years, Carol, and it's so tragic, but 4-year-olds, even 3.5-year-olds that I've had before were shut down already quite a bit. So it's just so very true that the child, Maria Montessori was the one she called it the absorbent mind, that the child incarnates their environment. And so if the child's been discouraged, and it's so often from, just a caring parent that just wants to nurture and take care of, but overly does so, or is neglectful of seeing anything, and the child's just expected to play and have fun and be stimulated, and again from a positive viewpoint, and yet It's not understanding that that child, again, go back to that infant turning from the breast, that child came into this world to be their own person. You know, I hesitate to use the word independent because people get the wrong idea, but you know, it is all about from that early time. And then I will tell you, when the child comes, as the child comes through Children's House, so up to the age of 5 or 6, then you start to really see, I mean, I can tell you the differences in some children's drawings and how much time they spend drawing something. You know, it's all over the place. So you just start to see those personality differences and those calls and gifts just bursting out. And so ideally, the child continues from age 6 to 12 into the Montessori elementary Children's House. And this is where the research comes in. And the children are just encouraged to, are you interested in the history of transportation, or you want to study jellyfish, or, you know, I mean, the sky's the limit. The children come through reading on about a 3rd grade level out of my room, and they're writing fluently in cursive, and they know basic math through hands-on materials. They are ready to explore and develop that person that they've come here to be. That's the ideal, and that's the potential that I've found in Montessori.
Do you have a story perhaps of a child whose gift you were able to bring out and recognize and help them along with it?
I mean, okay, well, I will say that I worked with 3 boys. It was interesting. It was in a real particular, I've been doing this 40 years, 35 years in the Montessori Children's House every day. But this little period, I had 3 boys who, I don't think Asperger's is now used, but they were on the spectrum. And they all came to me within a couple of years' time. And I just bring them up because it was so it's so heightened. And they're so hungry. And in all 3 cases, their parents were absolutely at their wits' end about what to do with these little guys. And they were all 2 or 3 years old. And they're just brilliant. I mean, the memory that these boys had and capability with language. One of them is a twin, though, and I'm still in touch with 2 of the families. And these boys are now finishing high school, but they've been able to really use those gifts. They were able to be honored for that being their gift. They're doing different things. One of them's amazing in theater. And another one, actually, the last I heard from him, he was doing some kind of contest with pinball machines or something. That's the one I'm not absolutely in touch with right now. But just being able to continue to feed them, to continue to provide for them. Whereas I was going to say the one who is a twin, he had completely stopped speaking. And his mother said, I thought he would speak before his sister. And then he just completely shut down. He has an incredible ability with language. And so being able to see that flower in him over the 3+ years he was in our Children's House was just gorgeous. He stopped by with his mom many years later and was observing the fish in the tank. And he said, well, what are their names? And I said, well, I haven't given them names. And so he proceeded to give one an Egyptian goddess's name. And he gave all the fish names. So, you just saw his ongoing confidence in bringing his love for language out.
Well, thank you so much for sharing and for what you've done for these children. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
There's so much there. There's so much there, Annie. Thank you. And even just this, I mean, Annie and I knew like 1 hour, we're just is, a tiny snippet. Yet again, just reminding those of us, listening, this hour is here to give this view from, child development from a Montessori perspective. We're here to ask ourselves, what is our part? So what is my part to do for me? Where do I need to heal myself? Where do I need to become more whole so that I can be the best? The best isn't even the word, but, so that I can show up wholly for my children, whether they're my own children that I'm raising, whether they're the students, as a family coach, the ones I'm working with. So I'm inviting all of us to ask those questions of ourselves. And I want to address two things that you said, I think, which is so important. Again, as an adult who's going to have a child in their life, number one, and with everything we've talked about this week and with everything in our life, it's our responsibility to take care of ourselves first. So remembering that. And then I'm thinking about, I have 4 children, right? So 4 different personalities. And how do we find, that environment where the child that we're caring for is going to thrive the best? And so I'm loving this conversation because I have been in early childhood for many years. I was a preschool director, teacher, supervisor, mentor, teacher, mentor, director. I consulted in a Montessori school. But I remember when I first went into a Montessori school, I was like, oh, this is not for my personality. I think I'm definitely some mix of like Reggio, Waldorf, outdoor. Yet I also didn't have a full understanding of the philosophy. And that's why this is so valuable, because you said things that I was like, oh, well, I would thrive there. And then having a deeper understanding of the 2.5 to 3 hour work space. And how, I love how the teacher is sitting most of the time. And, when I was in a preschool classroom, when we set the environment up in a way that is inviting and stimulating for the children, that's the majority of our job. And then we can sit back and let the children engage. So I think that is so important. And I'm watching time. I want to add this in. This might be a lot to add in, yet I'm going to do it because just touching on this environment. So Montessori is a particular environment, in the children's house, where they go to learn, or in your home. And I heard yesterday this woman, Sophie Strand, and she was talking about spiders and how a spider's cognition is not in its brain or body. It is extended into its web. So if you damage a part of the web, the spider acts as though it's had a stroke or something's wrong with it. And that extended, she talked about the extended cognition that we ourselves through others taking in otherness, from other people, right? So I'm just thinking of the classroom as the spider web, our homes as a spider web. And I hadn't intended on that pun, I weave that in with, from my perspective, I'm a soul coach. I'm a family coach, but I work on the soul level. So there's many people that don't share my perspective. From my perspective, children over the last 10, 15, 20 years are coming in with some of these challenges, whether it falls under autism, attention deficit disorder, attention deficit hyper disorder, because we as adults haven't provided the environment to truly let them thrive. And so we as adults are being challenged to do that. And I think this is why this conversation is so important. And how can we get these children who are coming in, whatever the label might be? So for ease of explanation, I'll use a label, autism or Asperger's. These children are brilliant, and they are commanding us as adults to communicate with them differently, to up-level our systems so that we can serve them. So I'll pass it back to you, Annie, because that's what you're talking about. And you acknowledge that in those children of the example you gave. Yet again, I will take it back, and it's going to transition well into our next hour when we get a Waldorf perspective. But heart connection, and being in nature. You know, we have, it is imperative that we connect with these children, all children, yet for those children who have a learning disability or an additional challenge, to find that heart connection, in which you explained it in the Montessori term that I hadn't realized, building relationship, so that the child is trusts and can then thrive in our environment. So back over to you.
Right. Wow. Yeah, I feel like there's another piece that I wanted to bring in, and honestly, listening to you with Adil yesterday, I want to bring this in because there are so many challenges for our children, and you know, even these issues that children have, so many of them are environmental anymore. You know, how much of children suffering from allergies is coming from all the toxic stuff in our environment and all of that stuff. And again, that's where the Montessori Home Project, which is going to be my website going forward, as we are closing the school in May. After 30 years, this particular school, yeah. And so my next thing is really to focus on the Montessori Home Project. And the Home Project really is about coming home to self. If you go to that little website, I talk about, there's a writing that Maria Montessori has that's not in one of her, it's in a little book called The Child in the Church, and it's in an essay, but she's talking about the center of the personality, and then the periphery, like the world around the person. But the center is like our secret core self, you know, our thoughts, our feelings, all of that. And then she says there are points of contact around that. So as we've been talking about agency, as the child seeks connection to something, that's that core self, that inner self, reaching out to the periphery and establishing a point of contact and keeping that a real dynamic personality. What happens for so many of us is that shuts down. We close off the points of contact, and we have this external self out here, and in here is this, you know, person that we're protecting, and we don't even know that person anymore because we haven't been able to express that person. You know, I'm giving you the extreme, but I think we all recognize that sense that we come out of childhood with. And so as our world has, you know, in a changing world, to go back to Jim's quote, what can we offer to build children's resilience? I was so moved yesterday, Karen, hearing you and Adil talking about massage, because I have had a beautiful young woman came into our school, and she's offered yoga and also individual massage, where the parents were invited to come and you know, be there for the session, but she and when you were sharing yesterday that you had been, if you don't mind, you know, it was all public yesterday, that, you know, you were resistant to massage, and when you gave yourself to that you know, physical experience, and yet it's such a nurturing, loving, connected, relational kind of experience to receive a massage or to give a massage. I have. My father used to ask us to give him, you know, these rough massages, actually, but the how it was releasing your tears right away. And it is that way that our children need opportunity. And so what we've brought into the school, because I was very blessed to have the 9 Gates Mystery School experience 10 years ago, which is an 18-day experience of esoteric and spiritual practices that I absolutely recommend to anyone. But from there, I really picked up, like, in all indigenous cultures worldwide, beginning in, you know, Europe and everywhere, there's a drum, there's a rattle, there's a flute. They gather around the fire, So each morning, the children and I gather around a lit candle. One of the children is playing a Native American drum that I know a drum maker here made. That we do a rattling. Rattle has a couple of aspects. It's a calling in of the spirit. And then you shake it a couple of times into Mother Earth for anything that's, disturbing you or you want to let go of, because release is a part of that whole adaptability thing, but they just, and then we talk about the moon phase and what planets you might see right now and what season of the earth we're in. And they absolutely, you can see how, just like I mentioned about seeing Antares rise this morning for the first time in months, come back to our skies. The children love to call that in on almost a daily basis. I will tell y'all, they say that one of them raises their hand and just wants to say, the earth spins and it's morning. The earth is turning and never stops. And, we talk about gravity and how the gravity is holding our bodies. Like you can feel it's holding your body, and we're breathing all the time and our heart is beating all the time. Like these constants, calling those in, those are things like we talk about. I talk with them about how the trees, the plants are breathing out oxygen and taking in our carbon dioxide, that whole exchange. Like celebrating that with young children. They absolutely get all of that. I just have to encourage parents and educators out there to talk with young children about these constants, because you can see how it warms their heart and helps them feel so comfortable in their body and in their world to know that these are things, the earth is turning. I can depend on that. I'm breathing all day and all night. I can depend on that. So I don't know if that even answers whatever you said, Karen, but
well, and really... those things are constants, no matter if you're in a Montessori or a Waldorf program or a Reggio, or if you're in a Christian preschool or a Jewish preschool or all the culture, and that is one of my just passions, just really wanting to bring in where we are, where we share our similarities, what is the same as humanity, and then celebrating the diversity. So when we can speak about these things, when we do speak about these things and acknowledge just the laws of nature is it's so vital. It's so vital. And I'm just taking a breath because there's so many things there. Would you please do me a favor and put the website in, for people in the chat? I wanted to see if Kate had anything that she wanted to add, or she might just be joyfully listening. Okay, thanks, Kate. And my heart just wants to pause for a moment. People who are in Zoom rooms with me, they know that I really welcome silence sometimes in our Zoom rooms and on the internet and live, on media streams. So let's just maybe breathe together for about 30 seconds or so. And I meant to say breathe together in silence. We'll continue breathing together. I hope. As we did that, I have the window cracked open a bit and I could hear the seagull, just that call of the seagull as I was breathing in and out. And how quickly that can add to the pause, like you mentioned, just that right back to nature. So Annie, what do you feel like? Is there, a direction you want to? We have about 8 minutes until Nicolette comes in, and we begin our Waldorf perspective, and yeah, I just want to see if there's, or Carol, if you had something that was just sort of like strongly on your heart that you wanted to offer in, please unmute and do that.
Yeah, the only other thing that go ahead. No, please,
No.
Carol. No, go ahead.
I wondered if you'd heard of Janet Courtney and her work with children, and you mentioned massage, because she believes in play. And one of the things was when reading particular books to children, to use touch, like going up the mountain and like maybe going up the back of the child with your fingers, climbing the mountain, and how important touch is. So I thought that was a wonderful topic that you brought forth about that. And I had an opportunity to work with children who were thrown out of school in Chicago, and I was a student teacher in charge of one student who only wanted to draw pictures of trucks. And so he got thrown out of school because he didn't want to do anything else. And I was so fortunate because I could teach him every subject by drawing trucks, from art to mathematics to science to every, using the right tools and finding imagery. I mean, just so much. It's so, I value so much bringing out people's gifts. And that's one of my purposes. I think you asked, what is your purpose here? I like to bring out people's gifts.
That's so true, Carol. I have a child that every day she asks for a different animal. She wants to sew it or do a little gluing project with it. I draw outlines for them for different things. And then I've got another little guy that loves all the emergency vehicles. So he'll ask for a fire truck or a police car, that kind of thing. So yeah, just and that kind of brings in, I love that you brought up play, because sometimes it can sound like Montessorians don't believe in play, because we offer all this serious stuff. But play is absolutely crucial, and absolutely to be honored in our lives as well. And that sense of humor, I think that's a key part, absolutely, of our adaptability going forward, is knowing that we're going to be letting go of some things, and having our sense of humor intact is crucial.
There's a couple things. Yes, play. I'm working on a book right now, and it's love them, read to them, and let them be. And I go back and forth, like, let them play, let them be. But then I realize each chapter will be like, let them play, and then let them eat. And it's just all about like that, developing this whole child. Yet I want to say something in regards to the massage and the touch. And I want to first really honor like each and every teacher out there, because I'm just knowing from a small perspective of Southern California school systems and public school systems. And all of my boys went through public school system, and there were many things I didn't agree with in the public school system. However, there were these phenomenal teachers in the system, and they just did everything that they could, to be their most authentic self and be the best teacher that they could be, with a lot of the rules and things that they have to follow. So when I was teaching preschool, I am here, I'm a paradigm shifter. I'm here to, when I was 13, I said that, I told my family I'm here to end child abuse. And then I changed the wording on that. So I'm here to be a catalyst, to ensure that every child on the planet is nourished physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and financially. And so as much as I can do that between the time that I'm here on this earth, that is my purpose and passion. So coming, back to touch, I remember, sadly, we're still dealing with abuse, teachers, parents, family members, leaders in scouting, churches. So a lot of times what I see happens is that like reeling back. So like there was a moment when I was teaching preschool that they were trying to say that you couldn't hug a child. So if a child runs up to you and hugs you, you know, what's appropriate touch, what's inappropriate touch. Now, this is a very big subject that I'm bringing 2 minutes to the close of our hour. Yet it's really important that we speak up, that we are connected to our own heart, because then if we have a problem, we can ask for help. If we see somebody that we trust and we love and we see that something is off, we can speak up. And we need to speak up. And I just remember saying, you know, to my director, if there comes a day that there is a rule in preschool as a teacher that I am not allowed to hug a child, I will quit. I will not support an institution that doesn't allow me to hug a child. I understand what they were trying to do,
Right.
but that isn't the way to resolve it.
Yeah.
And so we need to be shining light on this, and so that we can have massage in the school, appropriate touch, which, as we know, touch, healing touch can shift so much in a moment. So with 1 minute, I'll pass it back to you.
I would just want to say one thing on that too, and I did mean to respond to this earlier, so I'm glad, is that every child is different. You know, some children will run to you and give you a hug, but there are a lot of children that really, I have children that eye contact is very important. I have one child that will come to me multiple times a day and just look me in the eye and just say, I love you. I mean, that's his connecting point, is that visual. And I just will say this final thing that I do in the morning when we're doing practice is I sprinkle each child and I do this gesture. You know, this is a universal calling of the spirit, you know, over their head. And I'm telling y'all, there is something so energetically powerful about that. And it's my way of honoring each of them. And I see you. And I've got children that will just watch me like that's, so there's so many different, back to beloved community, you know, the ways of building intimacy. Again, each child is going to be unique in the way that they approach that. And just being sensitive to that and honoring that with each child is what we're talking about here, you know.
You just did that so beautifully. I mean, that is a definition of beloved community, is honoring each individual person, understanding where they feel safe. I think I saw something on Facebook once where a teacher, like, she had these options of how to greet the students, and the students could pick, and it was like a fist bump or a hug or just a wave, you know, and it's empowering the child to, you know, we're honoring the child. I mean, you know, Annie brought this up in the very beginning where, you know, as a mother, like, there's so many times we shut down our children's, you know, feelings and emotions. And sometimes the intention is pure. We're trying to help them. Or sometimes we're just in a hurry because we have whatever's happening. And so we're hurrying, but we don't know that we've just squashed that child's spirit in the moment. And if we don't see it and they don't speak up, sometimes that can stack. So you know, we've opened doorways to many more conversations here. I'm going to begin transition. I see that Ananda wants to say